What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? Today we're going to be taking a look at Trump's Rushmore speech. He said a couple of things in it that I highly disagree with. And ultimately today, I want to show you guys how the American government, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights are inherently anti-biblical. And when someone says that America is founded on Judeo-Christian principles, they are straight up wrong. And I can demonstrate this using only the First Amendment to the Constitution. So if you're interested in how the First Amendment to the Constitution is anti-biblical, then please stay tuned. Alright, heathens, well, if you guys did not see Trump's Rushmore speech, I'll have a link down below to his speech if you want to see it. And while Trump said a lot of crazy shit in it, I really just want to focus on a couple of statements from Trump. Here is the first one.
We will state the truth in full without apology. We declare that the United States of America is the most just an exceptional nation ever to exist on earth.
I've got to stop right here. The most just nation on earth ever? Really? I guess you don't recall how there are several cities that were literally on fire a few weeks ago because we are not the most just country on the planet Earth or ever in history. So I guess those particular things have slipped your mind. Also, black male offenders are still getting sentences that are about 20% longer than white males that are in a similar situation. 1 in 4 diabetics have to ration their insulin because we don't have universal healthcare or a healthcare system that would allow people to get life-saving medicines that they need. How is any of this just? But anyways, continue.
We are proud of the fact that our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and we understand that these values have dramatically advanced the cause of peace and justice throughout the world.
Okay, so this is what I really want to hit on in this video, because our country, the United States of America, is not in any way founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And today I'm going to demonstrate how we are not based on Judeo-Christian principles by only using the First Amendment. So to refresh your memory, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This First Amendment was originally broken apart into like 6 different pieces, which they then compressed into this First Amendment. So what are these things in the First Amendment that are so anti-biblical? Well, for one, secular government. This is wholly anti-biblical. If you just look at the Old Testament and how they ran their societies and how God demanded that the government at the time enforce one religion on everybody, that is clearly a violation of a secular government. And that is definitely what the First Amendment lays down, is that our government has to be secular. The second thing that it does is provide religious freedom. That is wholly anti-biblical. Throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, you have an intolerance for other religions. In fact, God calls upon various people in the Old Testament, being Moses and Joshua and others, to attack and senselessly kill other people of other religions, just because they are those religions. Supposedly, God commanded the Israelites destroy the Canaanites as well as the Midianites, all because they worship different gods. The first 4 commandments in God's top 10 list are wholly against this particular part of the First Amendment. Religious freedom on a Christian perspective cannot be tolerated. Now, that's not to say that all Christians now think that you can't tolerate other religions, but I'm talking about about the theology of Christianity and using their own Bible, their own theological book. You cannot have other religions being practiced in your society, or God will most definitely fuck you up. Number 3 is freedom of speech. Obviously, in the Bible, you can't actually say what you want to. If you say the wrong thing, God will fuck you up. If you have any kind of free thought whatsoever and decide to express that verbally that goes against this Yahweh God, then you will definitely be fucked up. And this is exemplified all throughout the Old Testament. Just take, for instance, the 3rd commandment on God's top 10 list. Do not take the Lord your God's name in vain. That is completely against free speech, and God will send you to hell for violating that. The 4th thing that the First Amendment guarantees is freedom of the press. Now, of course, this is very similar to our previous point of freedom of speech. All of the things that are covered underneath that one would also be covered underneath the freedom of the press. But this is also similar to how Moses was prevented from entering the Promised Land. You see, God in Exodus 17 told Moses that he just needed to trust him in order to bring forth water. But what does he end up doing? Well, in Numbers 20, you see Moses striking a rock and, pretty much taking all the flair for himself for producing water for the people. Immediately after that, God was like, hey, you're not going to be entering the Promised Land because you misrepresented me to the Israelite people. This is somewhat similar to freedom of press. See, in my Moses example, God is trying to dictate the press, being Moses, at the time. And that's exactly opposite of what our government hopes to do for the press, because our government provides protections for a free press. Also, a way that God exposes his control over press or media is through his use of prophets. All throughout the Old Testament, you have prophets. They have to relay verbatim what God tells them. This is God controlling every aspect of the press. And the 5th thing that the First Amendment provides is the freedom of assembly, to petition our government for a redress of grievances. This is anti-biblical because of Numbers 16. In that particular chapter, we find that a group of Israelites approach Moses, protesting and petitioning their government with a redress of grievances about how things are being run. And you know what God does to them? God has Moses and everybody else get away from them and then has the earth swallow them up whole. It's fairly obvious that God does not want you questioning his authority. I mean, 1 Peter 2:13 tells us that we should submit to all human authority. In Romans 13:2, Paul has the same sentiment of submitting ourselves to all governing authorities. And why? Because they are all placed there by God. So God does not want you challenging his authority over this entire world, but he also doesn't want you challenging the authority of people that he's put into place. An interesting note here is that prior to the Revolutionary War, this is the exact kind of rhetoric that was used by the colonial preachers to speak against separating from the King of England. They felt like they were meant to submit to the King of England because he was placed there by God. And by rebelling against the King of England, you were therefore rebelling against God. All of this, every point that I've covered, is usually rolled up under the freedom of thought. The Bible regularly tries to police your own thoughts, whether it's through the Levitical laws or through the New Testament. Like when Jesus says that if you have lusted after a woman in your heart, you have already committed adultery. That is literally policing your thoughts. And there are so many other verses in the Bible that make freedom of thought anti-biblical. In Proverbs 3:5-6, it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." So like I said, throughout the entire Bible, you have this anti-free thought kind of message. And that is what makes our Constitution and the Bill of Rights anti-biblical right from the start. Now, there are plenty of other things that I have problems with in Trump's speech, but the final thing that I want to hit on is this particular clip.
We stand tall, we stand proud, and we only kneel to Almighty God.
Now that right there is a wholly anti-American sentiment. It's anti-American because obviously we're not bending our knee to the almighty will of God. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights places the power of the government in the people's hands. Well, it's supposed to be the people's hands. The preamble of the Constitution starts with "we the people," and that right from the start places the power of our government in the hands of the people, not God. Also, there is nothing in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that seems to even acknowledge a God, other than protecting the right to believe or not to believe in any God that you wish. When Trump says the Almighty God, we all know which God he's talking about. He's not talking about a deistic type of God. He's not talking about the Islamic God or any other gods out there. He's talking about one God, the Christian God, Yahweh. He's talking about Jesus Christ. It's just simply anti-American to suggest that this nation, the United States of America, bends the knee to any God, because we don't. I would love for anybody watching this to answer something for me, if you can. If you're a Christian and you're watching this and you believe wholeheartedly that America is founded on Judeo-Christian principles, I would love for you to comment down below and tell me what Judeo-Christian principles that are unique to Christianity are actually embodied in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Please let me know, because I have yet to find one. Whenever somebody says that we are based on Judeo-Christian principles, not only can you pull out just the First Amendment to prove them wrong, but you also need to ask them, what Judeo-Christian principles do you mean? Which ones specifically that are specific to Christianity? Thank you, heathens, for joining me today. I hope that you will go down there below, leave me those comments that I asked for. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.
This is the very definition of totalitarianism.